It's 6:45 a.m. on a Sunday morning in July. At 99th Street in Manhattan, a barge sits floating on the massive expanse of the Hudson River. On that barge is Tzvee from Teaneck, New Jersey. He's standing there doing his final gear checks: goggles, swim cap, stopwatch on 0. He even pauses for a casual interview over the public address system. And why shouldn't he be confident? He has swum in a pool nearly every single day for the past 30 years. At the sound of the starting tone, Tzvee steps off the edge and drops 4 feet straight down into the river. The instant he hits the water, his brain is overwhelmed. The water is much colder and much deeper than expected. Total darkness surrounds him. Within seconds, his chest tightens, and a sudden primal panic sets in. This diagram illustrates exactly what went wrong. On the left, we see the perfectly controlled environment of a swimming pool: clear water, black lane lines on the bottom, predictable walls. On the right is the Hudson River: 0 visibility, freezing temperatures, and unpredictable churning currents. Faced with this sudden lack of control, his body reacts instantly. Tzvee's heart begins to race violently, and a suffocating tightness grips his chest. He stops swimming the front crawl entirely. 30 years of careful, methodical practice in a pool mean nothing in the first 60 seconds of a chaotic natural environment. The severe drop in temperature and the absolute lack of visibility trigger a biological alarm system, throwing the body into full fight or flight mode before the rational brain can even process what is happening. Compounding the cold shock is a severe tactical error. Tzvee decided to enter the Hudson River without wearing a wetsuit. Looking at this cross-section diagram, we see the physical cost of that decision. A wetsuit provides artificial buoyancy, keeping a swimmer's hips high on the surface. Without the suit, the legs drag. To compensate, he switches to a high-exertion breaststroke to keep his head above the chop. Churning his arms spikes energy demands. He takes rapid, shallow breaths. Oxygen levels drop, throwing his nervous system into overdrive. By minute 2, the physical stress breaks through to his conscious mind. He becomes entirely convinced he is going to die right there in the water, hallucinating his own obituary in tomorrow's paper. In desperation, he begins spiritual bargaining. First, he recites the Jewish Shema Israel. Then, deciding he needs to cover all his bases, he throws in Our Father who art in heaven, follows it up with a Hail Mary, and tops it off with Allahu Akbar, just in case. When the body is starved for oxygen and overwhelmed by adrenaline, logic disappears. The brain rapidly constructs extreme, irrational safety nets, like frantically praying to every major deity at once, simply to keep the body moving and fighting for air. But as minute 3 begins, Tzvee starts fighting back. He stares at a nearby rescue kayak, overwhelmed by the urge to just grab hold of the side and quit. Instead, he severely chastises himself. He demands his brain recognize that the tight chest is just panic, not a heart attack. He reminds himself that he's already survived having 6 stents put in his coronary arteries. If his heart can handle that, it can handle a swim in the Hudson. The pure terror slowly morphs into gallows humor. He jokes to himself that if he yells out to the lifeguard that he has an unpaid pledge to the United Jewish Appeal charity, they'll make absolutely sure he gets out alive to collect it. This vector map shows the reality of minute 5. The acute life-or-death panic is gone, but the physical disorientation takes over. Without the black line at the bottom of a pool to guide him, Tzvee wildly zigs and zags, pushed far off course by the river's strong currents and wakes. The environment itself becomes a nuisance. He swallows mouths full of dirty, salty river water and constantly bumps into the arms and legs of other disoriented swimmers thrashing blindly around him. Beating back panic in open water rarely involves achieving perfect form. Getting through the crisis requires aggressive internal dialogue and a healthy dose of humor to force an overstimulated nervous system back into a manageable rhythm. Finally, around minute 6, the end comes into view. Through the murky water, Tzvee spots the exit ramp waiting ahead at 79th Street. It is a New York moment. As he nears the Henry Hudson River off-ramp, he slams right into a literal traffic jam of dozens of exhausted, dripping swimmers, bottlenecked in the water, slowly inching their way toward the concrete. When he finally reaches the edge, there is no graceful exit. A strong hand reaches down, grips his slippery wrist and violently yanks him out of the river and onto solid ground. He survived. But the very first thought to cross his mind as he stands there dripping wet is the realization that he completely forgot to start his stopwatch at minute 0, and the physical ordeal isn't quite over. He now has to run barefoot over half a mile on raw, abrasive asphalt just to hand off the relay chip to his teammate on the bicycle. We often picture the conclusion of an endurance event looking like this photograph, a pristine, heroic athlete smiling brightly as they break the tape at the finish line. But true survival in the wild is far less glamorous. Pushing through a physiological crisis is rarely a graceful display of athletic mastery. It is an awkward, zigzagging, expletive-filled mental negotiation where the only goal that matters is putting your head down, taking the next breath, and keeping your arms moving until you hit dry land.